Hey guys, welcome to Module 2. Module 2 is how to interview like a pro. As I mentioned in the webinar, I've been coaching people how to interview for years, all the way from recent college graduates all the way up to CEOs. And so I've got a tremendous amount of experience, and I've learned just a ton of little things and big things that will really transform how you interview and turn your interviews into jobs. Okay, so after this module, you're going to have everything you need to be a successful interviewer, and really stand out versus your peers. And so in today's module, what we're going to go through is first of all, the 3 stages of an interview and strategies for each, how you attack each one of those 3 stages of the interview. We're going to cover the 2 most common types of questions you're going to get and how you need to prepare for them. So when you go into the interview, you're just going to nail it because you already know what the questions are going to be. You're already prepared to make certain that you just nail those questions. Number 3, the secrets to nailing the phone screen. Most first interviews are phone screen, and so I'm going to teach you how to really do really well on that phone screen and turn that into an on-site interview. We're also going to go through how do you prepare for that on-site interview and all the nuances that take place when you're an on-site versus a phone screen. And lastly, we're going to go through a cheat sheet, and then we're going to go through just a ton of examples, guys, today. So you're going to have everything you need. You're going to feel really good after this module because you're going to have everything you need to be a great interviewer. All right, let's dive in. So breaking down the interview, there are 3 key phases to an interview. The first section is the opening. The second section is when they answer you questions. I'm going to teach you how to do that. And then the third section is when you get an opportunity to ask them questions. And I am going to go through some strategies for each one of these stages. So in the opening section of the interview, guys, this is when they usually lead off with, hey, tell me about yourself. And it may seem a little casual at first. It's really just starting to break the ice. And what you want to do is you want to take 2 to 3 minutes, no longer than 3 minutes. Okay, for people out there that are verbose and like to talk a lot, guys, you got to be succinct. So 2 to 3 minutes, walk them through your background. And what I want you to do is I want you to go chronologically from the oldest experience to the newest experience, okay? And if you're a recent college graduate, like in the last couple of years, I'd like you to actually talk about which college you went to and why you went there, okay? And by the way, when you do this, you want to always be as positive as you can, okay? People like to hire positive people. I don't want to hear any negativity about how college sucked or that university sucked or this job sucked or that job sucked. Throughout the interview, it is really, really, really important that you stay positive, okay? And you want to spend the most time on your most recent or most relevant experience. So if you're going for a marketing job and you had an internship in marketing or even something that's somewhat similar to it, that's where you want to spend your most time. But once again, you're just giving the Cliff Notes version here. You want to give the interviewer as much time as they need to ask you questions because that's the meat of the interview, okay? You also want to make certain that you explain the transition or gaps. If you're a recent college graduate, this isn't a problem, but you've been out of school for a couple years and you've moved from job A to job B to job C, then you need to explain why you left job A and went to job B. And the reason for that is people don't like job hoppers. If they hire you, they want you to be there for a long time. So if you've moved around a couple positions, you need to explain why you left job A to go to job B. And what you want to do is, it's not that you left job A because it sucked and your boss was a jerk. And let me tell you something, if you work long enough, you're going to have bad bosses and you're going to have bad jobs. It's just the nature of things. But you do not need to bring that up in this interview, okay? You want to transition. You didn't leave job A because it stunk. You went to job B because it was better. It was more money, more responsibility, cooler atmosphere, better location, whatever it was. There was something positive about job B that led you to go there instead of something negative about job A that caused you to leave. People naturally like positive people. You've got to keep it positive throughout the entire interview. It's really, really important, okay? Now, the second section, this is a section where the interviewer is going to ask you questions. Okay, this is where the interviewer is going to ask you questions, okay? And so Those questions typically are going to come in the form of 3 different types of questions. The first type is what I call behavioral, and those are going to be questions like, tell me a time you blah, ... The second type are technical questions, and I use technical in a very broad sense because technical means different things for a marketer versus a finance person versus an engineer, etc. Okay? And the third type of questions are case or situational, and we'll go through strategies for each one of these types of questions. So behavioral questions. Those are, tell me a time you ... right? So let's go back here. So I'll give you some examples. So behavioral will be, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person, right? Tell me a time you had to accomplish a task with limited resources. Those are behavioral type questions. And now 90% of the questions you get, they're going to be behavioral in nature, okay? And there's literally 1 million of those things. But what they're really asking you to do is to describe your accomplishments. Okay, that's what, when they're asking you a behavioral question, that's how you're going to answer. You're going to bring in one of your accomplishments and you're going to use that to answer the question. And even though you're relatively junior probably in your career, you should have 8 to 12 accomplishments. And these are the foundations of your stories. And if you remember, we're going to cycle back, remember from the resume module, we taught you how to come up with your accomplishments. When we went through Alvin and Jennifer's resume, right, we built their accomplishments from places like McDonald's and Target and whatnot. Those accomplishments now are going to feed into the way you prepare for your interview, because that's what you're going to talk about throughout the entire interview, is you're going to talk about those accomplishments, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to frame those up in the STAR method of interviewing. And if you're like most recent college graduates, you've never heard of the STAR method. It is by and far the best structure you use to answer questions, okay? Let's break down what STAR is. STAR is an acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, result, okay? And what you want to do is, when they ask you a question, let's go through an example. Tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person. You want to describe the business situation that you were in. You want to describe the business task that you were trying to accomplish. You want to describe the action you took to overcome the obstacle. And the obstacle is always the question. In this case, it was the difficult person. What action did you take to overcome the difficult person? And then you want to describe the business result that you achieved. So when they say, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person, you'd say, well, I was working at McDonald's and we had to close up the shop every night, and I had this one person on my team who never wanted to help, and blah, 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 and so I took them to coffee and figured out what their issue was and found a solution for that. And as a result, we started cleaning up, and we actually got it down in 30 minutes instead of an hour, and we saved McDonald's all this money, blah, blah, blah. A very simplistic example, right? But that's how you frame things up. And now the reason you want to do that, okay, is because, let's go back here. The reason you want to do that is because most interviewers are horrible interviewers. Guys, I have worked for half a dozen Fortune 500 companies. I have interviewed literally thousands of people, and I have never once been trained how to interview. And sadly, I am the rule, not the exception, guys. And so by framing your answers up in this STAR method, what you are doing is you are giving the interviewer what he or she needs, even though they don't even realize they need it. It's what will allow them to really understand what you've done. And trust me, it will set you apart from 99% of your competition. Okay? Now, behavioral questions. So, first of all, what you want to do is you want to write out your stories. Okay? That's first and foremost. As I mentioned, you've got 8 to 12 accomplishments at this point in time. Okay? Really important that you write out your stories, guys. Okay? And as I mentioned, you've got 8 to 12 accomplishments, and you want to take the time and go ahead and write those out. Maybe not verbatim, but write them down on a piece of paper. Okay? And what that's going to do is a couple things. Number one, it's going to make it fresh in your mind, so that when you're in the interview, you don't have to think about it because you've already thought about it. Okay? Number two is I want you then to create a cheat sheet. And by doing that, and what I mean by a cheat sheet is you list like 1 through 10 and it's the list of your stories, and you list 2 or 3 words next to that, okay? And that's going to be your cheat sheet, especially for phone screens. You will actually have that on the desk in front of you. So that way, if you get thrown a curveball, and if you interview enough, you will be thrown curveballs, instead of having to think on your feet, you've got your list of stories right there in front of you. And so you can grab a story and make it answer that question. And what you're going to learn is that you can make one story fit literally hundreds of questions. And the reason for that is that you don't use just one skill set to accomplish a task. You use dozens of skill sets. And so all you do is when you're telling your accomplishment story, you simply emphasize a different part of the story. So whether it's a difficult person or limited resources or whatever it was in the question, like that could all be the same story. You're just emphasizing a different obstacle you had to overcome in order to accomplish that task. Okay? You want to rehearse your stories as well. So I want you to write them out. I want you to create a cheat sheet. And then I want you to say them over and over, okay? Keep them fresh in your mind. That way you can easily recall them when you're in the interview, okay? In addition, every single bullet point on your resume needs to have a story, okay? Let me tell you a little inside baseball. So I'll tell you the way that interviewing should happen. I'll tell you the way interviewing actually happens. The way interviewing should happen is the interviewer should prepare ahead of time, look at your resume, kind of develop a game plan, right? In reality, what happens is a minute before the interviewer races into their office where they got just chewed out by their boss. They've got 3 fires to put out they're trying to solve. And 60 seconds before the interview, they pick up your resume, and what do? They grab the most obscure bullet point you forgot was even on the resume, and they ask you a question about that. Okay? So because of that, you want to make certain every single bullet point on your resume has a story behind it, and you're prepared to talk about it. Okay? And as we mentioned, as an example of a behavioral question, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person. That's one of a million of them, okay? And that's that's a typical behavioral question, okay? Let's go through that. Right, so we take that, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person, we put it in describe the business situation you were in, describe the business task you were trying to accomplish, describe the action you took to overcome the obstacle, and then the business result that you achieved, okay? That's how you attack behavioral questions, guys. At the end of this, we're going to go through a bunch of examples from Alvin and Jennifer's resume. Okay, so we'll go into some greater detail. But do you see how that works? Do you see how the structure works? And once again, behavioral questions, you are describing your accomplishments. If you take nothing else away from this thing, this will get you 90% of the way there. Okay? The second type of questions are technical questions, guys. Okay, now technical questions mean different things for different tasks, right? If you're in accounting or engineering, or if you're a coder, or if you're in creative, or if you're in analytical, or if it's software specific, technical questions are very functionally specific. And you're on your own on this one, guys. Like I can't help you. If you're an accountant, for example, and they're asking you something about the tax code, well, that's on you, right? Now, as a recent grad, they're probably not going to ask a ton of technical questions. They might go into some of your Microsoft Office skills or some software-specific skills, okay? Make sure you list those on your resume, which we covered in the resume module, but be prepared to answer those questions. One word of caution. Do not lie, okay? If they ask you a technical question and you've never done it, then all you're going to do is make yourself look bad and back yourself in a corner, and if you lie, you will be done. And I'll give you a very specific example, okay, for a technical question. I was interviewing somebody and I asked them how good was their Excel skills? On a scale of 1 to 10, give me how good are your Excel skills? And the person said, I'm a 9. Oh, wow, that's great, that's fantastic. Have you ever used pivot tables? Oh, yeah, I've used pivot tables. Great. Can you give me an example of where you've used a pivot table? Silence on the end of the line for like a minute. It was very uncomfortable. Clearly this person knew nothing about pivot tables. And the point is, a good interviewer, and most people are not good interviewers, but a good interviewer won't stop at one question, guys. They'll ask follow-up questions. And in that example, I asked them if they were good at Excel. They gave a 9 out of 10. And then I asked them, I got deeper and said, have you used this specific function in Excel? And they said yes. And then I asked them to give me an example of when they used that skill or that function. okay? And a good interviewer is going to do that. So don't say that you know how to do something or that you've done something if you haven't, okay? What you can do instead is if they ask, do you have skill X? Okay, if it's a technical skill, do you have skill X? What you say is, well, no, I've never done that, but you pivot into something similar. Like, hey, I don't know how to use pivot tables, but I've done this in Excel. Or, I didn't know how to do this other thing in Excel, but I learned that very quickly. Okay, so you pivot into, if you didn't do it, you be honest and you say no, but then you pivot into something similar or how you learned a skill quickly so that you alleviate their concerns. Okay? As I mentioned, do your homework, don't lie, pivot if you don't know the answer, and yeah. Okay? All right. Now, the last section of the interview is your turn to ask questions, okay? And sadly, this is a section that most people screw up. They see it, this is not your chance, okay, to ask all your nitty-gritty questions. And what I mean by that is, how much money am I going to make? How much vacation do I get? When do I get promoted? That is not the objective of you asking questions, okay? The objective of you asking questions is that this is your chance to prove that you did your homework. You asking questions is a further extension of the interview. It's not a chance for you to learn about them, or else what people think it is. It's really for them to learn more about you, okay? And so you need to have 10 to 12 strategic questions prepared, okay? Strategic in nature, like whether it's about their growth strategy or if there is some news in the company, how that impacts them, or competition, or the nuances of how the functional areas work together, or whatever it is. Okay? You need to have 10 to 12 prepared questions. Okay? And you don't expect to get through all these questions. You just don't want to run out. Okay? You don't want to run out of questions in an interview. You want to make sure you use up the entire time. Okay? One word of caution. Always be prepared to answer any question you ask. Okay? I'll give an example. So I was interviewing for a category manager job, and I had done my homework and really asked what I thought was some really good strategic questions. And one of them was like, hey, can you tell me what the role of this category is for this retailer? Is it to drive traffic or is it to increase the basket size? And the interviewer said, you know what, that's a really good question. What do you think it should be? I had spent so much time thinking about what a really cool strategic question was, I never thought about the answer. So, always be prepared to answer any question that you ask, okay? Okay, guys, so, like I said, always be prepared to answer any question that you ask, okay? And I want to close this section on the question section with this. There is a closing question that you can ask that will literally double your success rate in interviews. I'm not exaggerating. In fact, I might be underestimating that. I have a closing question at the end of the interview that you can ask that I swear to you if you use, it will double your success rate in getting to the next step. Okay? Here's the question. Have I said anything or not said anything that will lead you to not recommend me for this position? Now, this is a bold question to ask, guys, and most people can't do it. They don't have the courage to do it. All right? And you do it at the end, when there's 1 or 2 minutes left, and they say, do you have any more questions? You say, yep, I just have one. Have I said anything or not said anything that will lead you not to recommend me for this position? Now, here is why this question more than doubles your success rate. First of all, most interviewers are horrible interviews, right? So there's a chance that they screwed up in the interview, or maybe you had a bad day, right? Once the interview's done, you can't save it. Like, once you're gone, you simply cannot save the interview. So, but when you're still in the interview, you can save it. So let's say you didn't answer something right, or they wanted to know about a certain skill set, and for whatever reason the interviewer didn't ask you about that skill set. By asking this question, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to say, oh no, you're great, you're fantastic, we want to bring you to the next level. Fantastic. Or you're going to get the waffling answer. And the reason for this is because you catch them off guard, and you'll usually get an honest answer. And the waffling answer goes usually like this. Well, I would have liked to seen a little more analytical skills. You use this opportunity to save the interview right there. Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. Let me give you an example of where I use my analytical skills, right? I can't tell you how many clients have used this and saved their interviews. Remember Kaylee from our example? Kaylee would not have gotten her job if she had not used this question, because her first interview with the company she went to, the interviewer was horrible, didn't know what they were doing, didn't probe in the right places, and she asked this question at the end, and the interview went on another 15 minutes, saved it, got her to the next level, and got her the job. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you to use this question. My one request, almost demand, is if you're going to do it, guys, do it. Don't go halfway. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will take my question and they'll turn into this. Do you have all the information you need to make a decision? Well, the only answer to that question, guys, is yes. And it gets you absolutely nothing. It accomplishes zero. So use this question, guys. Trust me, it will double your success rate in interviews. Now, some additional interview tips. 3 questions you should always be prepared to answer. Number 1, why do you want to work here? Make sure you've got a good answer for that. Number 2, why should I hire you? What makes you a good fit? Like why should I hire you? You got to espouse your own benefits. Like, right, what makes you special? You're a hard worker, like you're a good fast learner, whatever it is, okay? You're great at adding value. Like you want to come in and accomplish things and make the company money. And number 3 is why would you leave your current job? If you're currently working, they're going to want to know why would you leave that job. And if you're in like a retail environment, it's just like a part-time job and you go into a professional job, it's a pretty obvious answer, right? Some other tips on phone screens. Okay, number 1, make sure you have a good phone connection. Okay, it's imperative that you have a good phone connection. Don't put them on speakerphone, guys. Do not put them on speakerphone. Have a Bluetooth, have a headset, but do not put them on speakerphone. I know most everybody's using cell phones today. Make sure you've got a good connection and do not put them on speakerphone. Number 2, stand up and walk around, guys. It's when you sit, your diaphragm compresses and you naturally have less energy. And whether I'm recruiting for accountants or salespeople, all my clients like high energy people. And so when you stand up, you naturally have more energy, your voice projects better, it's just you've got better energy, and it comes across in the phone. Make certain that you have your resume, your cheat sheet, and your list of questions you're going to ask. Make sure you have that all printed out, okay? You want to make sure you've got all of that ready to go. Okay, now you also want to make certain that you do your homework on the interviewer. Now, most interviewers have got a profile on LinkedIn. If you find out their name, go do a little homework, see what their background is, see if there's something common. Maybe you went to the same college. If you've got connections with the interviewer, you always want to do your homework so you know who you're talking to. And last, we already talked about this, but create the cheat sheet, guys. Really important that you do that. Now, on-site interviews, a little bit different, okay? Number 1, you need to dress professionally. What does professionally mean? If you're a man, wear a suit with a tie. Now, with this generation, it's amazing that you're just not used to doing this. I'm telling you, you have to dress professionally. If you're a girl, either a professional business suit, but just dress professionally in some way, shape, or form. Number 2, be on every minute you're on campus, guys, okay? And number 3, I'll go through these in detail. I want you to treat everyone as though they are the decision maker. I want you to turn off your phone when you're there. Firm handshakes, look them in the eye. You want to vary your stories and you want to bring resumes, okay? So in the dress professionally, I've talked about this already. Guys, you got to dress professionally. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Really important you do that. Firm handshakes, okay? I can't tell you what a turnoff as an interviewer that is. If I shake somebody's hand, it's kind of limp, okay? Like it shows a lack of confidence in you, and I want to hire somebody who's confident. So firm handshake, and I want you to look them in the eye when you shake their hands. but also whenever you're in the interview, okay? When you're giving answers, I want you to look in the eye. Now, if you have a hard time with this, and some people do, and it's okay, what you do is you pick a spot in the wall behind their head, like right above or right next to their head, and you stare at that, and at least give the illusion that you're staring them in the eye, okay? I want you to be on every minute you're on campus. What does on mean? It means that you assume that you're there to be interviewing, okay? Like, I don't want you daydreaming or anything else. I want you to be on. You need to be at your best every minute, as soon as you step in that parking lot until you leave, okay? And I want you to treat everyone as though they are the decision maker. There's a great interview with Charles Koch, who's president of Koch Industries, the second largest privately held company in the United States. And one of the things they do is when they interview people is they care more about values than aptitude. And the interviewer said, well, how do you find that out? He's like, well, we have somebody that they don't think is important, take them to lunch in the company cafeteria, and then we observe how they treat that person and how they treat the cafeteria staff, because if they treat them differently than the interviewers, that's going to tell us a lot. And the point here is, you don't know who is influencing the decision making. You don't know that snide remark you made to the admin, hey, that admin's got to vote whether you realize it or not. So you treat every single person on that campus as though they are the person that's going to make the decision on whether you get a job offer or not. Okay? Turn off your phone. If you are there to interview all day, I want that phone off. I don't want you checking your email. I don't want you surfing the web. I don't care if you even have downtime. Okay? When you're there, be there. You are on their time. They are taking time out of their day to interview you. So you want to make darn certain they have your undivided attention. It'll turn off the interviewer if they see you on your phone. So just leave the phone off the entire time you're there. Okay? Bring a resume. Really important, because interviewers, they lose them, they can't find them, they forget to bring them. Bring extra copies to hand out. They don't need to be on fancy paper. You can do that if you want, but just have copies ready to go so you can hand it to the interviewer so they have it. Do your homework and research about the company. There's a ton of information online today. There's no excuse for not finding out everything you can about the company today. It's really easy with Google. So go do your homework. Be prepared to ask good questions. Okay? Now, some inside baseball. Interview, like what happens on the other side of the table? What happens with the interviewers? Now, I want to explain this to you so it can influence how you're going to behave in the interview. Okay? Well, as we mentioned before, most interviewers are horrible, okay? They just are. They don't prepare. This isn't a priority, even though it should be for them. And what you got to understand is, and I've seen this from both sides, because as a recruiter, like, they never move as fast as I want them to move, and it should be a priority. They've got holes in their team, and it's causing work for them, but they never can quite connect those dots. So this is always going to be more important to you than it is to them, and so you want to keep that in mind. On site, they gather behind the scenes, and this is important when you think about your interview, because when you go for an on-site and you interview with 2 or 3 or 4 people or more than that, what happens is after you leave, okay, they then go, sorry guys, having some technical difficulties there. They then go and they gather together right after your interviews, and they compare notes on the stories you told. And because of that, you want to make certain that you vary your stories, right? Because they're going to go back, and if you tell the same story to every person, that's all they're going to regurgitate in that meeting after the interview. So you want to make certain for interviewer 1 and interviewer 2 and interviewer 3, you're telling as many different stories as you possibly can, okay? All right, let's go through some examples, guys. Remember when we built those resumes in the resume module? Well, we're going to now use those, and those are going to influence how we do our interview preparation, because your accomplishments are your stories. And we've already built your accomplishments as part of the resume module. We're now going to use those accomplishments to build your stories for the interview module. It's amazing. See how that works together? See how that connects? And the great news is you already done this work. Like, you're already halfway home, which is fantastic. Okay, so here is a quick list of Alvin's accomplishments. He had 8 total, right? So let's go through these. So he increased annual revenue $12,000 by introducing a new add-on sales techniques. Okay, so how does that break down into a story? Well, the situation was I was working at McDonald's at the front counter. Right? The task is I would help about 20 people an hour. My manager wanted us to try to encourage higher sales. Right? So like that was a task I was doing. How do I encourage higher sales? And so every month, the action he took is every month we'd have a new flavor shake, and I'd make a point to try it so I could rave about it to customers. That's the action he took. Okay? And the result is I was able to convert 1/5 of my customers to add a shake to their order. Now, what this is missing, and you're going to see this in all these examples, is this isn't specific to a question. So, but I can take this same story and I can add it to as many questions as I want. So if he says, if the question is, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult person, I can use this example. I was working at McDonald's at the front counter. I tried to help about 20 people an hour. My manager wanted us to try and encourage higher sales. And then the obstacle is difficult person say, well, I had a coworker who always distracted me, and so I couldn't do that. Like I couldn't encourage higher sales, blah, blah, blah. So I did X, Y, and Z. And as a result, I was able to then change that and was able to convert 1/5 of my customers. Do you see how that works? Do you see how we change that up and how you can just change the action, right? That's what you do. You can still get the same situation. The task will change slightly, right? So we would add in this section, the difficult person. I would help about 20 people an hour, but when I had this difficult person working with me, I can only help 10, right? That can be the task. And then the action is what you did to overcome that difficult person. You could use this same story for a million different questions. You just slightly change the task and slightly change the action, and then you can use it for a million questions. Okay? The next accomplishment. Increase drive-through revenue by $45,000 by improving the money collection procedure. Okay? So, a situation I was working at McDonald's in the drive-through. The task is we had to walk across the restaurant to run credit cards. I convinced my manager to invest $500 in a new credit card reader for the drive-through, and I was able to shrink the average order time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. Okay? Once again, you just switch out the task and action here, and you can make it fit a million different questions. Whether it's a difficult person, maybe it's limited resources. So the limited resources here is that there wasn't a credit card reader, right? That's a limited resource. So you can talk about how you convinced the manager to go get that, right? But there's a bunch of different ways you can change this to answer any one of a number of questions. Let's go through another one. Saved over $8,000 a year by introducing a new napkin fulfillment process, right? I was working at McDonald's and I was responsible for maintaining the floor and the refill stations. One of the napkin dispensers was broken, so customers kept grabbing handfuls of napkins. Convinced my manager to buy new napkin holders so that it was easier for consumers. The consumers started using 50% less napkins, resulting in $8,000 annual savings. See how easy this is, guys? And all you gotta do is, once again, you just change that task and action, and you can fit it into a million different questions. Literally. Okay? Now, there's a download in this module. I've got all these examples. I can read them, but you guys can read them by yourself. I think you get the gist of what we're trying to do here. And I've got 16 different examples here for you. So you have everything you need to go and produce your own STAR questions for your resume. And that's really it, guys. That's all there is to it. Like the interviewing, it doesn't need to be hard. It's really simple. It's really what you're doing is you're telling your stories, guys. You're telling your accomplishment stories, and you're just tweaking them a little bit in order to fit the question you're getting asked. Anyways, hopefully you loved it. I think you got a lot of great information. It's the same prep I do with all of my candidates from CEO to college entry-level positions. And, my candidates, way more often than not, are successful in interviews because they follow this model. So I hope you'll follow it too. I think it'll work great for you. And good luck out there. Go land that job, guys.